He didn't just burn Rome, he burned history, morality, and everything that dared to oppose his divine theater. In the dead of night, as the flames danced along the marble walls of Rome, a solitary figure stood atop Palatine Hill, cloaked not in armor, but in silk, his fingers wrapped around a lyre, strumming melodies into chaos. That man was Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, artist, tyrant, and god in his own eyes. They say he sang while the city burned, that his voice soared as screams echoed through stone alleyways and temples crumbled into ash. Some called it madness. Nero called it performance. But the fire was only a beginning. Born into blood and betrayal, Nero's rise to power was written in whispers and poison. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, seduced her own uncle, the Emperor Claudius, to place her son within striking distance of the throne. And when Claudius choked on his last breath, poisoned, most believe, Nero stepped forward, just 17 years old, and placed the imperial crown upon his head. Rome didn't know it yet, but it had just crowned a man who would one day castrate a boy and marry him in a public ceremony. But we'll get there. In the beginning, the empire sighed with relief. Nero was young, educated, handsome, a philosopher king in the making. He quoted poetry in the Senate. He gave grain to the hungry. He was everything his murderous predecessors were not. And then, the masks began to fall. The first to die was Britannicus, the true heir of Claudius, the one obstacle in Nero's path to undisputed power. At a feast, the boy drank wine laced with a poison so subtle it merely silenced his voice before his body collapsed. Nero smiled. The guests looked away, and the empire moved on. Then came his mother. Agrippina, the Iron Queen who forged Nero's rise, soon became an inconvenient shadow. She criticized his lovers, challenged his authority, and whispered of a new heir. Nero, ever the dramatist, attempted her murder with style. First, he arranged a boating accident, a collapsing vessel with secret mechanisms meant to drown her. But Agrippina swam to shore, bloodied but alive. So he sent assassins. Blades finished what water could not. Her final words, when they came for her, "Strike my womb," as if to say, this is what gave birth to him. From that moment on, something inside Nero broke. Or perhaps something that was always there finally emerged. He surrounded himself with sycophants and sensualists. The court of Rome became a stage for indulgence, wine-drenched nights, masked orgies, and musical recitals where none could leave until the emperor finished his divine performance. He no longer ruled an empire. He performed it, and no performance was too extreme. As Nero's grip on Rome tightened, so too did his descent into theatrical madness. He saw himself not merely as emperor, but as Apollo incarnate, the god of music, light, and poetry. Statues were redone with his likeness. Coins bore his profile in divine pose. He erected golden palaces with halls too vast for purpose, domes that captured the heavens, and banquet rooms that turned with the sky. He performed operas on stage, insisting senators and nobles attend for hours, forbidden to leave even as they collapsed from exhaustion. Women gave birth in the aisles. Men faked their own deaths to escape the endless verses. But Nero's ego was insatiable. He believed Rome should see him, not as ruler, but as deity. Then came the fire. In July of 64 AD, flames erupted in the Circus Maximus. The blaze spread through the city like judgment. consuming temples, homes, marketplaces. For 6 days and 7 nights, Rome burned. Thousands perished. Entire districts vanished into smoke. And Nero? He watched. Some say he played his lyre as fire devoured the capital, singing of Troy's fall with tears in his eyes. Others claim he ordered the fire himself, to clear space for his golden house, a palace so massive it included an artificial lake and a rotating dining hall. When the flames died, suspicion turned toward the emperor. The people whispered. The Senate murmured. Nero needed a scapegoat, so he found one. The Christians, a strange and growing sect. They were already distrusted. Nero accused them of arson and treason. He ordered them captured, tortured, and executed in public displays of horror. Some were dressed in animal skins and torn apart by dogs. Others were crucified. The most infamous were dipped in oil and set alight, burning as human torches to illuminate Nero's garden feasts. He wandered among them in silk robes, laughing, singing. Rome, once the heart of civilization, had become a stage for its emperor's cruelty. But still, the people applauded, because they feared him, because they worshipped him, or because they knew the next act was always worse. After the fire, Rome was never the same. Neither was Nero. He walked through the ruins of the city like a poet strolling a shattered canvas. Where others saw loss and death, he saw opportunity. He unveiled his grandest vision yet, the Domus Aurea, or Golden House. It wasn't a palace, it was a god's playground. Covering over 300 acres, the Golden House featured vast halls adorned in gold leaf, gemstones embedded into ceilings, fountains of wine, and perfumed gardens sculpted like heaven itself. In the center stood a colossal bronze statue of Nero as the sun god, towering 30 meters into the sky. This was not architecture. This was megalomania carved in marble. But opulence wasn't enough. Nero craved transformation. He began dressing as a woman at times, then as a priest, then as a beast in ritual performances. He believed himself to be beyond gender, beyond human. He married not once, but 3 times, each stranger than the last. His first wife, Poppaea Sabina, was a woman of ambition and beauty. But during a fit of rage, pregnant and vulnerable, she spoke out against him. Nero responded with a violent kick to her abdomen, ending her life and their unborn child's. Days later, he wept in public like a widowed deity. Rome watched, unsure whether the tears were real or part of another performance. In her memory, or perhaps in guilt, he found a boy named Sporus. The resemblance to Poppaea was uncanny. Nero had the boy castrated and dressed in her garments. Then he married him in a lavish ceremony with all the pomp of imperial Rome. Sporus became the empress of Nero's twisted reality, paraded in jewels through the palaces of madness. But Nero's love life did not stop there. He later took another man, Pythagoras, as his groom. This time, Nero played the bride. During the wedding feast, he wore a veil and was given away by his attendants. The court bowed and celebrated the union of the emperor, not with scorn, but with fearful applause. For to question Nero's theater was to risk the role of the next victim. And behind all this, Rome trembled. The Senate had become a circus of flatterers. Nobles vanished after dinner parties. The Praetorian Guard, once loyal to the office, now shifted with whispers and bribes. Provinces grew restless. In Britain, Boudica rebelled. In Judea, revolt brewed. But Nero was too lost in his world of firelight and fantasy to care. He believed himself untouchable, immortal. He commissioned epic poems about himself, forced historians to write flattering accounts, and had astrologers trace his destiny in the stars. Yet, beneath the surface, rot had set in. The people began to murmur again, not of the Christians, but of the emperor. They mocked him in taverns. Graffiti stained the city walls. Coins bearing his face were defaced and tossed into gutters. Even the aristocracy, once silenced by fear, began to plot. One senator described him as a lyre-player on the throne while the empire bled beneath his sandals. But Nero? He was already composing his finale. By the year 68 AD, the masks began to crack. The provinces, once loyal under the weight of Roman steel, turned cold. In Gaul, rebellion spread like ink on parchment. In Hispania, General Galba, old, calculating, silent, was declared emperor by his legions. Rome, the eternal stage of Nero's fantasies, now whispered of succession. The Senate, ever a chorus of survival, began to plot in candlelit silence. Even the Praetorian Guard, once Nero's personal shield, hesitated. Their loyalty was no longer to the man, but to power. And Nero's was fading. At first, Nero dismissed the rumors. He performed, sang, recited poetry to shrinking audiences. But the laughter grew forced. The claps delayed. His dreams turned fevered, visions of wolves in senatorial robes, lions gnawing at golden statues. Then, one morning, the unthinkable. The Praetorian Guard defected. Their commander, once Nero's ally, joined the Senate in naming Galba emperor. Banners changed. Streets once washed in perfume now reeked of betrayal. Panicked, Nero fled his palace. He wore no crown, no purple robes, just a cloak and a dagger, hidden beneath the folds. With a handful of loyal freedmen, he galloped through the night, abandoned by Rome itself. He begged for refuge from senators, courtiers, even the common folk. Doors slammed in his face. Finally, he hid in the villa of a humble servant, miles from the city. There, in a darkened room, surrounded by cracked walls and silence, Nero awaited news. It came as a whisper. "They are coming for you." The Senate had declared him an enemy of the people. There would be no trial, no exile, only death. Nero trembled, not from fear of pain, but from the finality. He had once believed himself a god, born of Apollo, kissed by flame. But now, no audience, no applause, only the sound of horses in the distance. Desperate, he paced, clutching a dagger. "What an artist dies in me," he cried, over and over, as if the gods would spare him for beauty alone. His freedman, Epaphroditus, urged him to act. "They will not grant you dignity," he whispered. "You must take it yourself." Nero raised the blade, hesitated. Tears streamed down his face. Then, as footsteps approached the villa gate, he drove the dagger into his throat, shaking, failing. It was Epaphroditus who helped him finish it. And so, with a final gasp, the emperor fell, not in golden halls, but in a dirt-covered room, shivering in his own blood. He was 30 years old. News of his death reached Rome in silence. Some cheered, others wept. Many did nothing, like waking from a fever dream they dared not name. His memory was condemned. Statues were torn down, his name erased from inscriptions, his likeness struck from coins. Historians would call him a tyrant, a madman, a pyromaniac, a pervert, a clown. And yet, in the shadows of forgotten temples, poets still whispered of Nero, the god king who danced on the edge of fire. Because he was never just a man. He was Rome unmasked. Its glory, its sickness, its madness, and its brilliance. The city would rebuild, emperors would rise and fall, but none would burn so brightly, or so briefly, as Nero, Claudius, Caesar, Augustus, Germanicus. The last of the Julio-Claudians. The emperor who believed the world was a stage and died when the curtain fell.